get started right now with introductory statements from our candidates, starting with candidate Gary Chico. Right there.
Thank you. I thought I'd stand up so we can see you. Thank you very much to the organizers for putting on this forum to discuss these very important issues. I think it's critical that we have these kinds of forums. We must talk about these issues and bring them right on center stage. I think leadership is about doing the right thing, even in the face of repercussions that may hurt you. In 2004, when I was a candidate for the United States Senate in the Democratic primary, the Chicago Tribune asked each of the candidates, "What is your position on gay marriage?" To my surprise, the headline the next day read, "Chico alone in support of gay marriage." Ladies and gentlemen, this is what we mean by leadership. Things are not always easy, and I can assure you, having worked in the mayor's office, they are not easy. We have to do the right thing and act the right way despite the consequences. We have to model behavior. Now, I know we have a lot of work to do. And so about a month and a half ago, I asked for a group of about 12 organizations from the community to meet with me at the Center on Halsted. And we had a wonderful session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, candidate. 60 seconds. Use them wisely.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amara Enya. I am running for mayor, but I'm pleased to be in a space where we can have a conversation about what it means to be authentically you and to be able to live to your fullest potential, not just at the individual level, but as a city. What does it mean for Chicagoans to be truly and fully part of this city? To not be marginalized because of your race, your sexual orientation, your gender, or any other characteristic. To be able to fully participate in all that the city has to offer. This election, for me, represents that. It represents liberation, and it represents an opportunity to participate fully in Chicago and our potential. And I'm excited to share that vision with all of you today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, too. I'm Bob Fioretti, and I want everybody to look around this church. It's a great church. It was founded in, actually, the church itself and the congregation was founded in about 1870. You know, but look at what we have behind us. A mural 40 foot long, the Ascension mural windows. All of this adds to what we are and who we are. If this is the first time you've ever been in this church, come for the tour and see what it's about. Come to a service. Why do I start off that way? You know, I usually don't talk about religion in any of the political because I think people should be open. But we're in the midst of God's glory here and what it's all about. And God views us all as equal, and we should participate in what we can. You know, I'm proud that somebody talked about being the first candidate, as he was saying, to come out in front of for gay marriage. You know, it's important for all of us. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you, candidate Fioretti.
All right. Good afternoon, and it's a great day. It's nice and snowy. I'm State Representative LaShawn Ford, and I'm running for mayor of the city of Chicago. And we are now about to celebrate Dr. King's holiday. Dr. King stood for all of us in this room. He believed that everyone should be treated equally, and I believe the same thing. I have to tell you that if I didn't do this, I think they would be disappointed. So I have some special guests that volunteer with the campaign. It's my sister and sister-in-law, Sandra and Zena. They're stand for me. So they've taught me what it means to make sure that I understand the issues, because it doesn't come naturally for people. But I have to tell you, as a state representative, I've learned from this community, and I'm very happy that I learned. I'm very happy that I supported civil union and gay marriage. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to be with you. My name is Jerry Joyce. I'm running for mayor. I'm running because I think I have a keen understanding and a passion to lead our city, particularly when it comes to the economic problems, safety problems, and finance issues. I also consider myself an ally to the LGBTQ community and will be an advocate for the community. I understand that LGBTQ encompasses so many things, not just one label, but when it comes to safety and concerns and vulnerabilities and issues, it's across the spectrum. I did hire Michael Irwin to help me on those issues early on in our campaign, as well as other things, and it was the smartest move that I made. I understand we've come a long way in our city on these issues, and we have a long way to go, but I look forward to leading our next administration through that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is John Kohler, and we are in a beautiful church here, and I just want to apologize to God because there are some times where I get a little bit excited on some issues, and I know I'm in his house right now. So first of all, thank you all for being here. I know it's a snowy day out, but it's Chicago, and I grew up here my whole life, just like probably many of you all. The reason why I'm running for mayor of Chicago is because we have a tendency of electing the same people over and over, and I'm just fed up with that. We have a lot of people who are simply just tied to the past, and they can't break away from their political corruption. So I think we need somebody with fresh ideas and a new face inside City Hall. I'm the youngest person to ever run for mayor of Chicago in its history. I'm 30 years old. But the things that we need to improve upon is working with our community members and listening. We have a tendency in politics where they step on a pedestal and look down upon us, but that's not how government should be operated. It should be working with each other as one city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lori Lightfoot. And in the presence of my wife and our daughter, I am proud to say that I am the first person of the LGBTQ plus community to ever be on the ballot for mayor of Chicago. And that is a testament to all of you. There are so many people in this room who have literally fought for decades to open up the doors, kick down the restrictions, to make sure that people in our community have a right and an opportunity to be heard. And I'm mindful of the fact that I am standing on the shoulders of so many people, and I want to call out Art Johnson in particular, who's here, and other people from the community. We are a community who speaks our values and has the opportunity to do so, and that is precisely the kind of leadership that I will take to the mayor's office. I am so proud to be here today. Thank you.
I was going to give you all a second to calm down so I could talk. My name's Gary McCarthy. I am not a politician. I am a public servant. I've spent 35 years trying to make a difference in people's lives, and that's why I'm running for mayor. I cannot stand by and watch this city awash in crime, fiscal irresponsibilities, and our education system failing all at the same time, and the fundamental inequities that are going on here. I believe in fundamental fairness, personal choice. I don't believe in the status quo. I like to be a change agent. And I'll tell you this, if we are going to move this city forward, and this goes for everybody sitting here, when this election is over, I pledge that as mayor, I will end the polarization that we look at each other with. I will end the labels that we look at each other with and treat everybody with dignity, so that we can make a change in the society here, because none of us can do it alone. We've got to do it together. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Susana Mendoza, and I'm running for mayor because the future of our city is at stake. But let me just start by saying this is awesome. Look around this group of mayoral candidates. We have immigrants. I'm the first-generation immigrant. There's other immigrant people here. We have women of color. We have a proud lesbian, and even a guy from New Jersey. This is awesome. I'm going to say, look, I want to just start by thanking the gay community for leading the fight and the struggle and never, ever standing on the sidelines. I promise you, as your mayor, that I will be there in the forefront, never someone to sit it out. When I was a state representative in 2000, one of the first meetings I set up was with Equality Illinois to ask him, what could I do, representing one of the most conservative districts in the state of Illinois, where politically it shouldn't have been an easy call to support civil rights and gay marriage. But for me, it's always been an easy call because I always will do the right thing. My family left Chicago when I was a little kid because of the violence. And it's not okay to have to leave. Oh, man. I'm going to get back to that.
Thank you.
You know, I'd like to thank Second Presbyterian Church and Windy City Times and Equality Illinois for putting on this forum today. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I want to say that I was an early and strong supporter of Lamont Robinson for his state rep race. I'm proud of that fact. I'm proud of the support that I've given the LGBTQ community over the course of my political career. You know, I think that it's important to remember that I served in the Harold Washington administration, and he was the first mayor to take a strong position against discrimination against the LGBTQ community. And I'm grateful for the experience that I had working for him and his strong support of human rights for everybody. You know, I have pursued a policy of equity and inclusion in my race for mayor, and I think it's particularly important that that be extended to the LGBTQ community. I will prohibit discrimination by our city agencies and by our contractors and work to protect the trans community and particularly work on the murders of trans women. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Paul Vallis, and I'm also one of the many candidates for mayor. First of all, thank you all for not running. I am a lifelong public servant, but on the issue of equity, you know, I didn't learn about this. It came to me organically. Maybe, all right, spending 12 years with Dawn Clark-Netsch, working for Dawn Clark-Netsch had its influence. But when I put domestic partners in the city and school district contracts, nobody asked me to do that. When I supported marriage equality, when I ran against Rob Blagojevich, nobody asked me to do that. They just asked me the question. And when I went to Philadelphia and I put Gay Straight Alliance clubs in all of my high schools, the children asked me to do that. And when I created a program called Attic, where we would find housing and safe places for individuals to go to in the community, nobody asked me to do that. I just did it because it was right. So for me, equity has always been kind of an organic thing. Nothing to dwell about, nothing to contemplate. It's just been part of my being. So I'm glad to be here, and I'm going to enjoy this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone, for your opening remarks. And thank you so much for keeping your remarks to 60 seconds. We do appreciate it. For our first question, the LGBTQ population experiences high rates of both unemployment and underemployment as a result of discrimination. The unemployment rate for transgender people of color is almost 4 times the national average. If elected mayor, what are your plans to ensure that this under-resourced population will have access to quality job training, continued education that will translate to accessible, well-paying jobs for LGBTQ plus people of color? Candidate Enya, we'll start with you.
I can speak loudly.
Thank you.
Thank you. So one of the issues that I find in a lot of my work, especially with the business community and workforce development, is that there needs to be training for employers and nonprofits that do workforce training to make sure that they understand the issues unique to the LGBTQ community. If we are going to ensure that there are pipelines where they're not facing discrimination, that requires that they have to have access to the ways to mitigate discrimination in their hiring practices, but also in their training practices. The other issue is where these opportunities exist. We have to meet people where they are. We cannot concentrate workforce training opportunities or the programs that nonprofits deliver in only certain parts of the city. We actually have to expand them in the neighborhoods where particularly LGBTQ communities of color are residing. They have to have access to the information. The individuals delivering or the programs delivering those services need to be trained properly. And we also have to make sure that we're tracking them as they're getting placed in employment. Those are things that are lacking at this point that I would take as mayor. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate, you ready?
Thank you. You know, when we talk about discrimination, I think everybody up here is against discrimination, but I've fought for it in the past. I've had to sue restaurants and people from the community who are being excluded or fired from their jobs. You know, it does boil down to hiring, training, a sensitivity. But you know what? We have to make it stick. And how do we make it stick? It's through the courts. But we have to create a culture of inclusiveness. And I had job fairs for veterans, ex-offenders, and people from my community, which was the second ward at that time. And what did we do? If they weren't going to hire from this community here, they were excluded from participation, the vendors. It was not going to be a beauty contest that you show up and don't hire. And so therefore, we made sure that they hired from the communities here. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, LaShawn Ford, candidate for mayor, I would make sure that it's clear that we simply don't discriminate. And you have to work with the community that's concerned about the issue. So we have to make sure nothing for us without us. So the community must be strong advisement to the mayor's office, and there must be penalties in place when there's discrimination for people that are denied access to employment. And the city of Chicago under Ford administration will lead the way in showing the rest of the city how to treat people and how not to discriminate.
Thank you.
I would echo what LaShawn says regarding discrimination, but I also would add that we need to look at the reasons for the underemployment, the high underemployment, and when it comes to issues like homelessness and substance issues and lack of support, I think that's what would also go a long way, help addressing those things would go a long way to increasing the, reducing the unemployment amongst LGBT and transgender. So I guess echoing what everyone else says.
Thanks so much.
I mean, so we're in the year 2019, and isn't it upsetting that we're still talking about this? I mean, we're not in 1980s or 70s or 60s. We're in the year 2019, and the issues that we have in city government is that we're not inclusive. We can't have an inclusive Chicago until we have an inclusive city hall, and that's electing new leadership. Under my administration, I'm going to actually hire people on my staff that will be part of the LGBT community, because you are the ones that know the issue specifically. And we can spout up here, except for Lori, I mean, as far as we may know what you all need, but we don't know until we include people. We have to listen. And again, we're talking about this issue as if it was in the 1970s. That's wrong. We just have to treat people fairly, and that's what you'll get under Mayor Kohler. Thank you.
Well, let me just pick up on that last point. I know that people of goodwill don't need to be taught how to be decent and be inclusive, right? And it's not something that is unique to our community, but obviously walking in our shoes, we know what needs to be done. And fundamentally what we need to do is make sure that the city leads. We lead by example, by opening up the doors of City Hall to people across our community. We lead by making sure that we have services in every neighborhood to make sure that people have real opportunity. We lead by stating our values and making sure, as frankly President Prickle started to say, that we will not tolerate discrimination against people in our community, particularly the trans community. And it's shameless that 2 women were murdered last year and those murders still go unsolved. But really it's a question of leadership and emphasis and priorities and making sure that real opportunity is created for everyone. And the city has the power to do that if we have a mayor who's committed.
Thank you.
Before you start my time, can I just clarify? We don't want to be labeled, right? I'm not from New Jersey. I'm from the Bronx. That really hurts, Susana. I'll get you back someday. Okay, so here's what I think. I think we've got to get rid of the Chicago way. I know everybody doesn't want to hear that, but that causes polarization. We've got to create a culture of acceptance. That's first of all. But I also have to tell you that what gets measured gets done. And we've got to measure these dynamics that we're talking about. And in City Hall, there should be a special office that measures these metrics that we're talking about, who's hired, who's not hired, how many people are out of work, to train people, track what happens with city services, and ensure that we sanction those who don't participate fairly and, where appropriate, sue or use the law against them. That's what I would do as mayor.
Thank you.
Sorry about that, Gary. The Bronx, whatever, not Chicago. So. But I'm going to say this. Like, to me, it's not about just talking about acceptance and tolerance. I mean, those words imply that there's something wrong, and that's not okay. In my administration, I'm going to intentionally look to hire the best and the brightest. And I've done that as clerk, I've done it as controller, and guess what? The best and the brightest, a lot of times, are gay. And here's another thing. I want you to join my administration. Yeah. It's true. And I want you to join my administration as your whole, full self. Someone who wants to be proud and loud about who you are, not have to hide who you are from your coworkers or your boss. Because that's what makes this city great. Mendoza administration is going to be who I've always been, one that's inclusive and celebrates rather than tolerates or accepts.
You know, I've been a progressive my whole life and a champion of social justice. I was one of the founders of the Progressive Caucus in the City Council and a sponsor and supporter of every affordable housing and living wage ordinance that came before the body. You know, I think it's important that we have a strategic plan to address the needs of the LGBT community, access to health, housing, economic disparities. We need a specific plan for transgender health. And I think we need to work on the Getting to Zero campaign, testing, treatment, PrEP. These are social justice issues, these are human rights issues, and we need to focus on them, and I would as mayor of the city of Chicago.
Thank you. Let me suggest three specifics. First of all, you've got to work with the advocacy community to empower them to monitor, to report, to make recommendations. So the policies can be guided not by some city office, but actually by you. That's number one. Number two, the city controls $20 billion in income. $20 billion with all the governmental enterprises associated. You set the tone with $20 billion in income. I did 58% MBWB contracting with Black and Latino workers, and I just did it through an executive order. So at the end of the day, it can be done. And the third thing is any award of city money or funding that is made to any entity, regardless of the nature of that entity, should comply with the city's equity standards. Those three things create an infrastructure of accountability and infrastructure of equity. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think we have to wait to start to change culture and behavior. We've already hired senior staff on our campaign who happen to be gay, and they're outstanding. I'm very proud of that. Furthermore, when I've served in government in so many different capacities, we always had people from the community in our senior administration. And it actually pained me to see some people who hadn't come out and who felt they couldn't come out. It was traumatic to watch this happen. We also have to enforce our laws. I was shocked to learn that the Human Rights Commission has been gutted. There are no resources in that commission. I pledge to bring them back and enforce the laws, not only in Chicago, among the government, but among the private sector as well. We'll change this. We can do it.
Thank you, candidates. Moving on to the field of education. In Illinois, more than 3/5 of LGBTQ students have been verbally harassed because of their sexual orientation or gender expression, and 22% of them have been physically attacked because of their gender expression. Since the mayor appoints the Chicago Public School Board, you will all have great opportunity and power to implement affirming education policy. What actions and policies will your administration undertake to protect, support, and affirm LGBTQ young people and transgender students in particular, and ensure that they have opportunity to succeed in the classroom? Let's begin with candidate Fioretti.
Thank you. I think bullying is a problem, not only across the board with CPS. I think we have to find ways to deal with the issues. You know, I cannot imagine if I was a kid growing up in Chicago and I was gay and I'm coming to realize that I have an attraction for somebody else of the same sex. We need to be able to help our children, help our men, women, young folks, transgender. We have to identify that and help them seek and solve the problems. You know, bullying is a big issue, and I've been against it. I've even fought through lawsuits on it against CPS in the past. And I think we need to make sure that we create a culture, an environment where people can come together. And we have to do it by training our teachers so they can recognize it and fight for the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Ford?
I'm not going to let him outdo me. I'm going to stand too now. I have to say that it's very hard because I think John said it, that we have conversations like this because it seems like it should be natural. And so we are here to learn from the community that could teach us. And in our schools, when I think about the LGBTQ community, there's no one on this panel that could even relate to being a black male in this city like me. And I know what it's like to be discriminated against, to be denied. And because of that, my policies and my administration will be guided by social justice and making sure that everyone is treated equally. Everything that we talk about here today is going to boil down to just making sure that everyone is respected, everyone is treated equally, and no one is harmed in their life. That's what it all boils down to, and that's the way I expect for my administration to be.
Time.
Thank you.
So our schools need to be safe for all children. To that end, I would require education regarding LGBTQ, sensitivity, education, and reporting awareness, reporting methods for concerns from children that are bullied or subjected to or feel that maybe they're getting bullied or picked on or whatever term you want to use. All our schools need to be safe. So I would implement awareness, whether it be in the classroom and the teachers, and some sort of reporting method to fight this problem. Thank you.
One of the issues that was mentioned is that the current board is all appointed by the mayor. And I am somebody who believes in the hybrid system where you have 5 appointed and 4 elected, so there's a checks and balances. I think that will benefit the city of Chicago. The other thing is, a lot of these kids may not be aware that they're bullying because they're very young. They may come from a broken home, or they just may come from an environment that's what they're surrounded by. So the more we can engage our parents, the more we can engage our teachers, and the more we can engage our students, the better off our school system will be. And not just from an equity perspective, but just from how we treat others. And kids, they all want to learn. But in Chicago, we have a tendency of not listening to them. We have a tendency of not listening to our teachers. And those are the individuals that are on the front lines. They are the ones actually in the schools. But from a mayor's perspective, we never listen to them. We always say, hey, this is the right way to do it, and that's the way it's going to be. But under my administration, I will have a hybrid elected school board, but again, engaging teachers more, engaging parents, and engaging students.
Thank you.
So the question was about bullying. Last November, I issued a detailed, comprehensive LGBTQ plus policy. And included in there was a mandate to make sure that CPS has a curriculum that includes inclusiveness and anti-bullying. We can go further, though. We need to make sure, obviously, that our teachers are also diverse, that they come from our community. We need to make sure that there are other resources in the schools, like social workers, who are also helping our kids, particularly when they're going through the difficulty of coming out as a teenager. We also need to make sure that there are clubs and other supports in and out of school so the kids in our community have a safe place to go and mentorship. We also need to recognize that many of the homeless youth in our city are from our community. That's why I also propose making sure that we've got 24-hour walk-in shelters and places for them to go, so it's not just they get to stay there till 9 o'clock and then they're out on the street.
Time.
There's a lot of challenges that we have, but we can face them together.
Thank you.
So you're not going to be able to see this, even in the second and third row. But what I hold here is the matrix for making a complaint within CPS. And there's 5 levels that it goes through once it's reported. This is the bureaucracy that has existed for decades, which has allowed hundreds of our children to be sexually abused in CPS, many of which are from the LGBTQ community. And this only stays within CPS, those 5 levels. You know what the answer is? Here's the answer. We're going to do away with this bureaucracy. We're going to create a hybrid investigative unit within the Office of Student Protections with the police department and CPS. We're going to eliminate all these layers because this is the bureaucracy that has allowed hundreds of sexual abuse cases to exist.
Thank you.
All right. So my intro got cut off when I said that we left the neighborhood because of violence, and no family should have to leave their neighborhood because of violence. But I would argue that no family should have to leave, or no person should have to leave their neighborhood because of who they are or who they love. And the fact of the matter stands that today, a lot of our kids that are going to school that are getting bullied have to get on the red line, for example, if you live on the south side, and travel an hour and a half just to find a place where they can be themselves, where they're not going to get bullied, where they can love and they can be free and they can feel like they're a part of the fabric of Chicago. That's what needs to change, and I'm going to get to do that. And one of the plans that I put forward on my Future Now plan, which is my 50 New initiative, which deals with repurposing schools in some of the most under-enrolled and under-resourced areas, will allow us to keep kids in school longer, have access to mentors that actually look like them. You want to learn about architecture or engineering? Let's have a gay person be that face in that room, in that place, which today might not be a safe space for straight and gay alliances, but that teacher might be their entry to a better life. So my time's up.
Thank you.
You know, I'm a former teacher. I spent 10 years in the classroom, and I know how important it is that our schools be safe and supportive places for our students. And it's hard to learn if you feel afraid. It's very hard to learn if you feel afraid. So our homes, our neighborhoods, our schools have to be safe places for our children. You know, we need to be sure that we have an inclusive curriculum, an LGBTQ inclusive curriculum in our schools that supports the young people who are part of the community, and which also stresses the success that the LGBTQ community has had in addressing the AIDS crisis, talks about heroes like Barrett Rustin and Harvey Milk. We also need representation. Representation matters. So there should be LGBTQ folks who are leaders in our public schools and are also on our Board of Education. It's really important that we acknowledge the contributions of all of the people who make up the quilt of this nation. These are basic human rights, and it's especially important that we focus on making our schools safer for young people.
Thank you.
I'll step down. The way you empower the community is by empowering the community. I think the school board should have a representative from the community on the school board advocating. Secondly, the way you empower the community is by putting people from the community in positions of responsibility. And my approach was always to work with the communities, all communities, to identify candidates, individuals, to move into those positions of responsibility. Third, there's no substitute for training and retraining, not only of teachers, but also of students. That's why we had our character education curriculum and our diversity curriculum. Fourth, you have to have a zero tolerance policy and you have to have reporting. When I was CEO, we have 24-hour crisis intervention teams that could be dispatched to any home for any child who was bullying. We are now in the age of social media where you can network that way. And lastly, we need to make these issues organic to the schools. And that's what you do when you create programs like The Attic or programs like clubs, like LGBTQ clubs in each of your high schools, so it becomes part of the fabric of the high school. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Again, I think it begins with modeling behavior. When I ran for mayor in 2011, I asked Todd Connor to serve as one of the co-chairs of my campaign because I thought it was important to show people that we will be inclusive. As mayor, with regard to the appointments I would make, I will look to the community for representation on the school board. But as Tony Preckwinkle said, it's also important to pass this inclusion initiative. But I don't think you have to wait for Springfield to do it. The Chicago Board of Education has enough authority right now to get at this issue and make this happen today. We don't have to wait for Springfield to act. I think it's important that we show absolutely no tolerance whatsoever for this kind of bigotry and bullying that would go on. Gary McCarthy raises a good point. There are some levels in this thing that need to be straightened out. But remember, some of those levers are also to protect the privacy of the individuals involved, but we can get this better.
Thank you. And finally.
So there are a couple of levels where this issue arises. One is within the institution. So in the same way, we understand that the best way to build trust is to actually know about each other. This is education. There is currently police torture curriculum in CPS. We also have African American curriculum that's supposed to be enforced and is not. In the same way that a curriculum dealing with the LGBTQ community can be a part of our schools. But professional development is key. We can't assume that people understand how to navigate these spaces, especially as teachers, so we need resources for them to become educated. We also have to have licensed clinical social workers and counselors in our schools so that students who are experiencing bullying have somewhere to go and someone to talk to as they work through those problems. CPS also has to update its cybersecurity controls. A lot of the bullying is happening on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, and every other social platform that young people are very savvy at. If we're not keeping up, we're missing a whole section of bullying. And third is with students.
Thank you.
Candidates, thank you so much. Next, I'm going to ask you a lightning round question. And remember, when I ask this question, please respond with a yes or no. We're going to start with candidate Ford. We can figure out how this is going. HIV is a serious health epidemic within Illinois, specifically affecting the LGBTQ community. A coalition of state and community partners is developing the Getting to Zero Illinois plan, which aspires to dramatically lower statewide HIV transmission by 2030. Do you support the Getting to Zero Illinois plan, and will you, as Mayor of Chicago, direct the Public Health Department to aggressively support this goal?
Yes.
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 I think it's yes and yes.
Yes, I lost my godson to HIV in 1990.
Of course.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
No, it's too long. We need it right away. We should do it now.
Thank you so much.
To get to zero, yes.
Thank you so much, candidates. For our next question, and we'll start with candidate Joyce. Health is impacted by a number of factors, including economic opportunity, education, and other social determinants of health. Unsurprisingly, the most underrepresented communities face the most health disparities. What will you do as mayor to ensure that the LGBTQ plus community have accessible to affordable, accessible, and affirming health care?
Yes or no?
No. You get 60 seconds. Thank you, candidate.
Can you ask that question again?
Sure. Health is impacted by a number of factors, including economic opportunity, education, and other social determinants of health. Unsurprisingly, the most underrepresented communities face the most health disparities. What will you do as mayor to ensure that LGBTQ plus people have access to affordable, accessible, and affirming health care?
Well, to the extent that they do not, because of discrimination or other factors, I would seek and fight to eliminate those factors and make sure they have access to the requisite health care that they deserve and that, frankly, as a society, we owe to whomever, whether they be LGBTQ or not.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think this goes along with some of the other questions where we just treat people fairly. The fact that we have a lot of issues in Chicago as far as mental health goes, a lot of the neighbors that are a part of this are ones that have been neglected. And I grew up on the south side of Chicago my whole life. And for some reason, again, we don't invest in our neighbors and we don't invest in our communities, but we do so in the health-wise by just treating everybody fairly. And I will work with my administration in order to do that, but we have to start engaging the right professionals as far as people who have been in the industry of healthcare and engaging people in the communities who are most impacted by it as well.
I think one of the most effective ways that we can start addressing this issue, which is an issue, frankly, that cuts across a lot of different communities, is making sure that the City Department of Public Health plays a much bigger role in leading. The Department of Public Health has a bare bones budget. It's way smaller than any other municipal public health department in large urban areas. We got to make sure that we provide them with sufficient resources. We got to build on the work that's already happening in our communities, for example, with Howard Brown and other healthcare providers that are delivering community-based care, and make sure that we are addressing the unique challenges of this community, like getting to zero, making sure that we get PrEP access beyond, frankly, the north side and into black and brown communities where HIV continues to be a significant issue. But again, it's focus, leadership, and determination, and working with the community and building on those assets that already exist.
So we all have plans for economic stimulants into every part of Chicago. We all have plans to improve education here. But one of the things that I have not seen anywhere, and we started doing this when I was superintendent, was creating a glossary of organizations that provide help in every area that you could think of, whether it's immigration status, whether it's health, whether it's mental health, whether it's financial, whether it's substance abuse, and so on. And what we need to do, and somebody has to take control of this, and it will be my administration, is to put together a glossary of all the organizations that are out there providing all of these services right now. Because the only way you get services now is if you have heard about something from somebody else. At the end of the day, we need to put those organizations all together and create community centers where you go when you need health, and that should be in our schools, our community schools.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry, I know, a little violent over there. Okay, ready? All right. So 57% nationally of, or I should say nationally, 57% of LGBTQ people report that they do not feel that they receive equal quality care when they go see a healthcare provider. And in Illinois, 33% of transgender individuals feel that they are discriminated against by their own healthcare providers. Again, this brings me back to my original point that you shouldn't have to drive or ride an hour and a half on the red line to see a doctor that you could be feeling comfortable with. We have to be intentional about providing healthcare services to the people who need them in the communities that they live in. And we also have to get away from treating HIV as just a gay man's disease. It's not. It's really great. It's really great that we have so many white men who've taken advantage of PrEP, but we have to make sure that that's available and equally available and easily available to people of color in different communities in Chicago.
You know, healthcare is a basic human right, and I'm proud of the fact that as president of the county board, half of our budget goes to healthcare, to the Cook County Health and Hospital System, which has always served everyone who comes to our door, regardless of race or ethnicity or sexual orientation or immigration status. And we were the first to provide an HIV/AIDS center devoted specifically to the care of those who are impacted by the plague. You know, there are big disparities between healthcare outcomes for members of the LGBTQ community and the larger population. Those need to be addressed. I'm particularly supportive of the Getting to Zero campaign, since new infections are disproportionately impact communities of color, particularly African Americans. That's testing, that's treatment, and that's PrEP. I also think that it's important that we look at cultural competencies in our healthcare providers, and that we try to address the emerging challenge of crystal meth addiction in the African American community among African American men. Again, healthcare is a basic right.
So let me offer some specifics. First of all, you need to create and the infrastructure for advocacy so that the community has the power to go in to assess, to evaluate, and to monitor and to make recommendations, number one. Number two, your health department needs to become an advocate not only for providing those services that the city makes available, but also to ensuring that private providers are also providing services. Number three, you know, health institutions in this city get massive tax breaks and tax abatements. Any tax break, any tax abatement, any grant that is provided needs to be provided conditional on them providing equity. And fourth, we need to rebuild our community-based social service infrastructure so that the best services are always the services that can be provided most directly and most locally. Thank you.
Thank you very much. For some reason, the city of Chicago has gotten away from providing public health to its citizens, and it started with mental health. We've cut back so drastically that we've hurt our citizens. Why we closed the mental health centers is absolutely beyond me. I've offered a way to cut waste in Chicago government by eliminating the infrastructure trust, which does nothing over 7 years, and put that $2 million immediately back into the budget to reopen the mental health centers. But it goes much further than that. We've talked about the drug PrEP. The problem with the drug PrEP, we need it. It's a lifesaver, but the cost is out of reach. At $1,300 a dose, it is beyond people's reach. We have to use the City of Chicago's Department of Public Health, put it back to where it was as an advocate, and deal with big pharmaceutical companies to bring the price of this medicine down. And I will work every day to make sure that that happens.
When it comes to having health care, one of the most important things that the city can do is use its position to audit federal health care providers, FQHCs, that operate in many of our communities. Accessing health care is not an automatic thing. It has to be culturally relevant and culturally responsive. That means that these organizations that are doing work in the community have to understand what options are there for their patients. They have to be equipped with the information to go out into communities and make sure that people know what is available. And we don't see a lot of that happening. We can't expect people to simply walk through the doors just because we think that that's what they should be doing. The city has to measure this in some very tangible ways. One is actually having a sense of how many of these providers are providing this information in the communities. How many people are using this information? And third is about testing and research and making sure that when research is done, it is inclusive, that the population being studied is part of the boards that are conducting this research, and that results from the research are actually given back to organizations and communities and shared.
Thank you.
You know, I got to say, a lot of talk up here. You know, sometimes I'm hesitant when I talk because I don't have saliva. Because of the cancer I had, the treatments I had, the radiation. I know what healthcare means, and I agree that healthcare is a human right. But I went to over out of the 65 churches in my ward, I spoke at 50 of them to make sure our constituents signed up for the health care program, made sure that they got to the county. I was involved with a cancer issue, and we had 200 women that we went to in the Obla homes. We knocked on doors to make sure that they got proper treatment. We found women that had cancer. We made sure that they had full health care to take care of them. You know, talk is cheap, but action is what you need. Thank you.
So I think we owe a great deal of gratitude to President Obama for making sure that we have health care in America. And I have to say that I worked very hard to make sure that we got health care. I've been waiting for this moment to make sure Madam President knew that it couldn't come to the county without Springfield. So I helped get health care in Cook County, and President implemented it. So thank you very much for that. So it came through us, and it went to her, and we did it. And now in every community, I think it's so very important that Chicago is a city that is the most covered, and everyone has a family doctor, a medical home. And when it comes down to making sure we get to zero, it is important to know that I've been a friend of this community for a very long time, and one of the most important bills that I passed was a bill to make testing a part of routine. That got us to zero, got us to the point where we're at.
Thank you, candidates. Let's move on to the next topic, immigration, beginning with candidate Kohler. The question is, what will you and your administration do to ensure that some of the most vulnerable immigrants, including LGBTQ immigrants, are protected under the city's welcoming city ordinance?
Yeah, I think the first people we need to deport are corrupt politicians. I am in favor of Chicago being a welcoming city. My family is an immigrant family. My nana and my dad's side, they came from Italy and Croatia. And Chicago, for some reason, we don't do that much often. But again, it's about inclusive. I agree that we need to have the CPD handle our problems. I don't think that we should be assisting ICE because our resources need to be staying in the city of Chicago. I don't think we should be breaking up families. But again, it all comes down to we have to work together. And my whole thing is Chicago should remain a welcoming city, but we have to practice what we preach. And we're not doing that as in City Hall. Thank you.
So as we are present in this moment, President Trump is supposed to be delivering a speech where he is tying DACA to his wall, and without a hint of irony or the cynicism that evokes. We have to be a truly welcoming city here in Chicago and be a leader in the nation. Our welcoming city ordinance has exceptions that must be eliminated. We cannot allow the Chicago Police Department to collaborate with ICE. We cannot allow the gang database to continue. And we need to do everything that we can to strengthen the reach into every neighborhood, particularly our immigrant neighborhoods, so they understand, because we provide the reality of peace and welcoming and providing strength and jobs and training and access to health care. That's what being a welcoming city is. Truly speaking our values, not just on a piece of paper, not just when we stand up in front of a crowd, but being welcoming.
Time.
So, first of all, being undocumented should not be considered a crime. It's that simple. Second of all, municipal police departments across this country are too busy to do ICE's work, and they should not be doing it. So we should not be reporting status to ICE. Now, here's the flip side of this. I believe in maintaining our welcoming status, but if you get arrested and convicted of a felony, you should be prosecuted, do your time, then get deported, because we don't want to protect criminals. It's a whole different issue than being documented or undocumented. Now, I just mentioned that the help centers. Those help centers should have the ability to help people become citizens in this country at the same time. There has to be a desire to do that. I believe that we need to protect those folks by that. My grandfather was undocumented.
Thank you.
Well, as the daughter of Mexican immigrants, this is a very personal issue to me. I mean, I know what my parents had to go through just trying to make a better life for their kids. I'm very proud that Chicago is a sanctuary city, and as mayor, I'm going to fight not just to keep the sanctuary city, but for those of you who have seen me taking it to Bruce Rauner the last 2 years of my life, I just can't wait to take it to Donald Trump. Now, I can't wait. I'm so looking forward to it. Beyond the fact that he wants to build a wall, we're going to build a wall in our city against him coming in and trying to continue to marginalize, to spread his hate, to the things that he's done in terms of trying to dehumanize the LGBTQ, specifically transgender people who are fighting for our rights in the military. It's sick, and we have to stand up to it. This is what you've done your entire lives. But remember, I only have 10 seconds. Again, we still live in a city where Boys Town needs to be a beacon, not just a bubble. And we're on the south side and the west side.
Time.
It stops feeling like it's 1980.
Time.
Thank you.
You know, I'm a history teacher, and I always say that America is a great nation in large part because people have come from all over the world to make it so. And Donald Trump and his terrible, despicable remarks about immigrants is not the only challenge that people who come from immigrant communities face in the city of Chicago. You know, we have a welcoming ordinance, but it includes carve-outs that enable our Chicago Police Department to cooperate with immigration and customs enforcement, and that's wrong. Early on in my first administration, I worked with Commissioner Garcia, now Congressman Garcia, to end any cooperation by county law enforcement officials with immigration and customs enforcement, any cooperation. You know, we also have to look at the gang database. There are 128,000 people on it. 11% of the African American community, 11% of the African American community, 4% of the Latinx community. And that gang database has no criteria or guidelines for getting on it. You don't know if you're on it, and you can never get off.
Time.
Thank you.
You know, when I was CEO of the Chicago Public School System, we were a welcoming school district because we took care of kids and their families regardless of their immigrant status. And as a grandson of Greek American immigrants whose signatures are on Ellis Island, including the individuals who got sent back because they had certain illnesses and things like that, this is something that's close to my heart. But as I said over and over again, you know, the city has tremendous resources. First of all, the city needs to be a welcoming city and just not in reality in terms of the treatments and the services and the supports that they provide to individuals, and they should not discriminate and they should not single out individuals because of their immigrant status. The second thing is we need to make sure that agencies that are the beneficiaries of the city's largesse likewise meet the city's standards. So we need to start practicing what we preach, and we need to make sure that anyone who's the beneficiary of city tax breaks or tax incentives or grants does likewise. Thank you.
Thank you. My grandparents came here from Mexico to look for a better life, and I saw them struggle. And finally, my parents and then me were the beneficiaries of their struggle. This is personal to me. My wife and I, before we came here today, went to Mujeres Latinas en Acción. Why? Because today's a special day for women to show their power. This organization helps Latina women in domestic dispute situations. It's very, very important that we support organizations like this. And if I'm mayor, we'll give them every ounce of support that they need. Let's talk about sanctuary city legislation. It's great, it's a good law, we love it, I've worked on it over the years, I've helped enforce it over the years. But let's face it, there's some holes in it. I called a press conference early in this campaign to point out that the city of Chicago is giving money to Gary Airport to deport thousands of people every year. Every year, our money is going to Gary Airport to deport people. It's got to stop. We have to live this, not just talk about it.
Coming from an immigrant family, sanctuary status is important to me, and I think that the city should eliminate carve-outs to the Welcoming City Ordinance. But what does sanctuary mean when LGBTQ people of color are racially profiled in Boys Town? What is sanctuary? What is sanctuary when Black trans women on the West Side get killed and reports are not made to the police department? They're not taken seriously. What is sanctuary when the way the police identifies homicides continues to misgender people, so the data is not even accurate? So if we're going to talk about sanctuary, let's talk about what sanctuary should mean right here, right now. And I don't think at this point that for LGBTQ people of color, and then specifically trans women, Black trans women, they do not have sanctuary in this city. And I think we have to start addressing those issues as well so that documented and undocumented have real sanctuary.
I think Amara's right. And we all heard it loud and clear from your applause. But you know, where has everybody been? What have we been doing? You know, get involved with your local school council. Start the struggle, start the fight, make the change. We can't sit back. It doesn't matter who's the mayor, because there's so many other resistance in our communities. You know, when I said the no on that one question, everybody was saying yes. Why do we have to wait? Why do we have to wait to open up our mental health clinics? Where was everybody when I was always on the front lines to say we ought to open it up? And especially the county ought to be opening up more of them. You know, it's time for change. But change only happens when we all get involved. You know, when I lived at Addison and Lakeshore Drive, I saw the problems that we had in our community. I fought against what we're talking about now to create the change that's necessary here. Thank you.
Time. So what the city needs is a moral leader that's going to make sure that, as mayor, that he or she stands up for what's right and just. And what you have with me is a track record that you could look up and you see that I support what's fair and just. I've supported the immigration community time and time again in Springfield. And so that's clear that my policies will be driven by my beliefs. Secondly, I think that the mayor must be a part of a moral movement to bring these communities together, the ex-offender community, the gay and lesbian, LGBTQ community, all the people that's been left behind must come together and fight together for what's right. We can't continue to do it alone. You're in a fight. Black people are in the fight. Immigrants are in the fight. It's not right. Time.
Thank you.
So our system of immigration is severely flawed and broken, and it's a federal system, and it needs to be fixed on the federal level. And it's so unfortunate, it's been so many years, and it's unfortunate that our administration has not fixed it when we had the Congress, when there was a will to fix things and an ability to get a fix accomplished. So we're left trying to deal with a federal problem on a state and city level. We're doing the best we can with it. I support the welcoming ordinance of Chicago and the sanctuary city laws of Illinois. It's not perfect, it could be better. I do not support throwing out the gang database. It should be tweaked, certainly, but that's an intelligence tool that was built up and has, you can hiss if you want, but you know, that's a list of gangbangers that has been compiled over the years, and it's an effective intelligence. It may be problems with it, but I don't think you should throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, candidates. And thank you, Imani, for co-moderating this first half. Indulge us for 30 seconds as we transition to our next co-moderating team of Anthony Galloway and Kim Hunt.
Okay, so this time we're going to start with the lightning round. And I think candidate McCarthy is first? No? Candidate Lightfoot is first. My bad. Okay. Currently, there are a number of cities, counties, and states that recognize and include certified LGBTQ-owned businesses in their supplier diversity programs. Not only does this diverse and inclusive practice ensure that these certified LGBT business enterprises have equal access to supplier diversity business opportunities with the city, but it also empowers and encourages these LGBT business owners to hire from within their communities. If elected, would you require that the City of Chicago also include certified LGBT-owned businesses in its supplier diversity procurement opportunities?
100%.
Okay.
Yes.
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 So thank you. In keeping with that, we have a second lightning round question. To the candidates, we're going to start with candidate McCarthy. Okay. So do you intend to appoint any transgender individuals to prominent roles within your administration? I don't want us to conflate that with the LGB experience. So we're particularly talking about trans folks. McCarthy, let's start with you.
Absolutely, I would.
Yes.
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
Yes.
So thank you all so much. Oh, yes. Did I miss anybody else? Okay, all right, all right.
Unanimous, yes.
Okay, okay. So that we're done with the lightning round for this round. Okay, next question, which starts with candidate Mendoza. Like many of their straight counterparts, LGBTQ older adults want to age in place. However, a lifetime of employment discrimination means over 1/3 of LGBT older adults live at or below 200% of the poverty line. Chicago has rising housing costs and rapid gentrification in the past decades, making housing unaffordable for many Chicagoans. What are your plans to ensure affordable and safe housing for LGBTQ older adults, disabled people, families, and low-income folks?
I coughed. What was the very last part of the question?
What are your plans to ensure affordable and safe housing for LGBTQ older adults, disabled people, families, and low-income folks?
Well, great, thank you. Number one, we need more affordable housing throughout the entire city of Chicago. It's just not right that there's only a handful of neighborhoods that people feel even safe living in. And when there's just a handful, it means the supply obviously far exceeds it, or the demand far exceeds the supply. It means you're shacking up with your parents, which is not cool, or with 2 or 3 roommates to pay the rent. The tragic thing about seniors in the LGBTQ community is the fact that we are finally getting to a point where they have led the fight to get us to where we're at today, and then are retreating back into not being able to be themselves and be with their loved ones in their most important years toward the end of their life, where they deserve that dignity that they're entitled to. If we are moving forward with comprehensive affordable housing plans in every single one of our 77 neighborhoods, they have to be inclusive and intentional about the LGBTQ community, about people with disabilities. They shouldn't be an afterthought, and they should be part of the planning process. And as your mayor, I will make sure to put them at the front.
You know, we can't have viable neighborhoods in the city of Chicago without affordable housing. And I put a lot of emphasis on community building when I was alderman of the 4th Ward. We built 1,500 units of housing, mostly affordable rental housing, but some mixed income and market rate housing. We built 2 new senior buildings. So we've got to focus on the broad issue of affordable housing, and we've got to be sure that that housing is accessible and accepting of members of the LGBTQ community. I think it's also important that we look to models like Town Hall and Under One Roof and try to replicate them around the city. It's really important that we have focused efforts on the LGBTQ community. It's also important that we provide housing, although this is around seniors, for the young people in the LGBTQ community, because 30% of homeless youth are members of the LGBTQ community. So people at both ends of the spectrum, marginalized, our young people and our seniors, both need access to affordable housing. We also need to be sure that people are... Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, this is how you do it. First of all, you remove the obstacles to allowing affordable housing to come on the rolls. For example, simple, you remove the obstacles to converting unimproved space to garden units. You could create 150,000 units in the next 4 to 5 years with no subsidies. Secondly, the city take the housing that it controls and secure the housing that is unoccupied sitting in housing court and turn those houses over to community-based organizations so that the community-based organizations can renovate those houses and make those houses available to the community, whether it's in need for shelters, in need for the homeless, in need for wayward youth, 50,000 potential homes occupancies. The third thing is you lay out a financial plan, as I have, on the internet and laid out publicly, that caps property tax increases, because gentrification stops when property taxes start going up. Thank you.
We have an affordable housing crisis in this city, not just for seniors, but across the board. I've spent the greater part of my career as an attorney representing developers like the Hispanic Housing Development Corporation that aims to keep Hispanic seniors in their neighborhoods, not just with housing, but with services that are in those buildings. It's not just about 4 walls, it's about having social workers, activities that engage the seniors so they can live healthy, quality lives. The City of Chicago's housing plan right now is heading in the right direction, but it took a long time. I think at 20% set aside on the property. We can't let developers buy their way off and send them out into the hinterland. We need to stay on the property so we integrate our communities. I'm going to work on that feverishly to make sure that that happens. This is an imperative throughout our city, and we will get it done.
Thank you. When I was alderman of the 2nd Ward, I supported a lot of tax credits, made sure that we brought in affordable housing across the board. We created about 700 housing affordable units in the ward in my 8 years. Of course, when they moved the whole ward up to the north side, you got to wonder what they're doing, the political ruling class, to make sure that people can have the opportunity here in the downtown area for it. But you know what? We need to make sure, the question was more about senior housing and what to do. You know, we got to make sure we don't have bullying in the senior housing, because that's what happens. We've got to look at what happened at the town hall district, where we've converted that old police station into senior housing for this community. We got to make sure we do it throughout the city, and that's the only way we're going to achieve equality and good, affordable housing in this city. Thank you.
The city of Chicago controls CHA, and it receives billions of dollars, and it manages billions of dollars in funding to eradicate homelessness, but it's not doing a good job. I really don't agree that the CHA is going in the right direction. It's actually going backwards, because we see so much discrimination in CHA and housing as it is today. So as the mayor, it will be clear that we will make sure. I do agree with something that Paul said. There are lots of vacant and abandoned houses on the south and west side where you see nowhere else but on the south and west side. And that is a grand opportunity to put people to work. It's a grand opportunity to make sure that we allow for people to build. There are private sectors out there that's ready to build senior housing, ready to reduce homelessness in this city, and we could do it when we have the support of the city of Chicago. Thank you.
So I am a firm believer in affordable housing, but I am not surprised in the situation that we are in right now, because we keep electing this elitist machine politician network. And if you go downtown, you see a bunch of investments. But when you go to the south side where I grew up, or the west side or the southeast side, it's a lack of investments. I mean, we elected Rahm Emanuel, and you might say, oh, he's a great person, but no, he forgot about the communities. Look at all the cranes downtown. Do you see any on the south side? Do you see any on the west side or on the southeast side? We've been forgotten. And that's because of the leadership in City Hall. And we need to change that in 2019. This is a very, very important election. And again, you can elect another third term for Rahm, or you can elect somebody new. Thank you.
The question was about senior housing. I issued a, but you didn't answer either, so it doesn't really matter. I issued a housing plan back in the fall, because everywhere I went, from when I jumped into this race back in May, this issue came up. We are in a crisis. No matter who you talk to, we're down at least 120,000 units, and it particularly impacts the seniors, and particularly in LGBTQ community. We know how to do this, but we have to have a city government that is willing to work with local housing developers to cut through the red tape, to provide support and resources, and get it done. It's not complicated, but we know that in the last 15 years, 3/4 of our city, not a single affordable housing unit has been built. And why? Because we let aldermanic privilege get in the way. We don't have a city government that works in favor of the people. We have to change this by electing a leader who understands it and will get the job done.
Time.
You know, I think I've spent more time standing up here waiting for you to stop clapping for Lori. So it's funny how the further we go down the road in this campaign, the more I hear people up here open their mouths, the more I hear myself speaking. Back in March, when I declared my candidacy, we talked about how intricately intertwined the problems of Chicago are, and we have to solve all of them at the same time. We can't solve crime and not solve housing. We can't solve education and not solve the economy. And here's the best example. What we need to do is bring back the vocational schools and put the apprenticeships with the unions right into our high schools to teach people to fish, not give them a fish. At the same time, What we have to do is give startups and small businesses economic stimuluses to go to the neighborhoods, and then what we do is we assume those abandoned properties, rehab them, and create affordable housing all at the same time. And that has to include individuals from LGBTQ, African American, Hispanic,
Time.
Asian, you name it. Thank you.
Time.
So, that was really nice. And some firecrackers kind of lit up over there a little bit. Let's keep that momentum going. Before we move on, there are a few community leaders that we would like to recognize. It takes more than just the few of us that put this together to put this on tonight. So I want to recognize David Munar, who's the president and CEO of Howard Brown Health, who's with us tonight. I see my friend Daniel Pohl from Heartland Alliance. I think I see Daniel Pohl in the audience tonight. Hey, Daniel. Mona Noriega, our commissioner on Chicago Human Relations. Tracy Bain, the former publisher of the Windy City Times. And may I add, the current publisher of The Reader. John Peller, I saw his post on Facebook, but I haven't seen him. CEO and president of AIDS Foundation of Chicago. Hello, John. Julio Rodriguez, the president of Alma, Illinois. Our very own Brian C. Johnson, the CEO of Equality Illinois. We already heard from Lamont. And Kevin Morrison, the first LGBTQ commissioner of the Cook County Board. If there are any other organizational leaders, please stand at this time to be recognized.
Yeah, Brave Space Alliance.
Brave Space Alliance is in the house. Mark Lovelace, forgive me my memories, of CJR. Okay, we're gonna keep it moving. I like to sing. Just to stall time a little bit while I find my spot on the program. Thanks for helping me out, Q. Okay. LGBTQ, this question is going to start with candidate Preckwinkle. LGBTQ plus people of color, particularly those who are transgender, non-binary, or intersex, are often afraid to go to the police when needed and report high levels of mistreatment and harassment by the police. The draft consent decree filed last fall in the U.S. District Court calls for sweeping reforms for the Chicago Police Department. Regardless of the decision of the district court judge, how will you ensure that reforms outlined in the consent decree are enacted and enforced?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to acknowledge that we owe a great debt to President Barack Obama, because before he left the White House, he asked the Department of Justice to look at the policies and procedures in the city of Chicago's police department and came back with a devastating and damning report of where we are. I think the first thing we have to talk about is the importance of investing in our police department. You know, we have not provided our police with enough professional training. We provide them with two days a year of training. We need to double or triple that right away. And particularly invest in crisis and intervention training and training around de-escalation. But we also need cultural competency training in our police department. We also need better supervision of the officers on the street. You know, the best practice in this country is 8 to 10 officers for one sergeant, and in some of our districts we have 30 officers and one sergeant. So even if you're well-intentioned, even if you've been well-trained, you cannot possibly supervise folks in that way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, clearly, the implementation of the consent decree really needs to be monitored, if not directed by the mayor's office, and that'll be my priority. But if you look at the consent decree, 80% of the stuff in the consent decree is stuff that should have been going on. You know, the filling of police vacancies, the hiring of sergeants, training and redundant training. I mean, so much of the stuff, the tasers, the night Laquan McDonald died, there were 500 tasers. New York had 15,000 tasers. Think about that for a second. So my priority will be to rebuild the police department in terms of staffing as well as infrastructure, because through having sergeants and training officers and redundant training, you have the infrastructure of accountability. And what I want to do with the police department is to make sure that the next generation of police officers come from the community. When I ran to Chicago, there are 10,000 ROTC cadets in the Chicago public schools. 90% are black and Latino. Imagine if they became a pipeline for first responders in the city. You would have the type of organic transformation that could change the nature of the department. Thank you.
Thank you. I support the consent decree. I think it's a common sense document. It's a shame that it had to come to what it did with the Justice Department of the United States, calling for it to be implemented. I don't think anybody on this stage wants to do anything but implement it. But ladies and gentlemen, make no mistake, it's about leadership. I've called for a change in leadership in the Chicago Police Department because that Department of Justice came in and talked about this department. And the leader at the top of that department is not getting the job done. Some of my colleagues disagree up here. But I think if you want to change things, you need a leader who's going to implement that consent decree, make it happen, and make no excuses. It's high time we've been beyond this subject. We can make this happen. Community policing lies at the heart of what I think we need to do to rebuild the relations between our police and our community. We started it in 1992. It worked fine. Somehow it went out the door. It's time to bring it back and rebuild the trust between the citizens and the police.
When I was elected alderman in 2007, people said to me, because I was talking about diversity in our police department, some of my colleagues came to me and said, oh, we can't be talking about that. You cannot be talking about that. Well, every time there was a test, I went out, leafleted my neighborhoods, my areas, and don't forget, I was the first person elected who was white since 1915 in a 76% African-American ward. You know, we need people of diversity in our police department. You know, the consent decree is a long time coming. If we would have had professional leadership, it would never have happened. If we would have been on the forefront of what needed to do, it would never have happened. You know, the consent decree is basic general orders, special orders on what needs to be done. And to answer the question, you know, the 225 pages really doesn't address the issue that you're talking about. What we need to do is make sure that whoever is it does it for our community.
So this is real tough because I keep hearing the conversation about fairness and treating people right. And I'm just thinking about how I'm just living this in the city of Chicago every day of my life. And I hear what people are saying, and I hear a lot of promises. I just want you to know, 12 years in Springfield, I know the best way to get things done is to make sure you build coalitions and work with people. It's hard for me to just listen to all these promises over and over and over and over again that may sound good, but my conscience tells me the only way we're going to really turn this city around is to elect me as mayor, to be the one that's going to have the moral judgment to work with the community. And what we have right now is a reminder of A. Philip Randolph going to the White House to meet with President Johnson. And Johnson wanted to help with the civil rights movement, but he couldn't. He said, make me do it. That's what we need.
So I agree with the consent decree when it comes to more training of our police officers. I think the more training, the better. But I believe that my specific idea is better than a lot of provisions in the consent decree. Because right now the issue is that we have tension between the communities and the police department. And in order to reduce that tension is my 60-40 plan. That in order to police in that district, 60% of the police officers have to live in that district. So now they're not seen as outsiders, they're seen as community members. And that's a new idea that we need inside City Hall, because the police, if they're living in the neighborhoods, they're gonna know the neighbors better, they're gonna know the streets better, they're gonna be investing in the neighborhoods, they're gonna be growing their families up there, and they're gonna want their families to be safe. So if 60% of them live in the communities, then we then reduce the tension and then both the communities and the police can cooperate with each other, and that's what we need.
What will I do to continue the work? I'll continue the work that I've been doing the last 4 years to fight hard for police reform and accountability. The work that is manifested and memorialized in the consent decree started with the Police Accountability Task Force that I led and a lot of the recommendations here. But don't be fooled, friends. That consent decree has flaws, and it has to be changed. It allows for chokeholds. That's Eric Garner. It allows for shooting into crowds. That's Betty Jones. And it doesn't have a foot pursuit policy, and we've seen so many shootings across the city that are a result of a foot pursuit policy. So we need changes, but we need a leader who understands it. In the last 7 years, 23,000 people in our city have been shot. 23,000 since Rahm Emanuel was sworn in. And part of that is because we had a mayor who learned on the job. We cannot afford to make that mistake again. We need an experienced leader to take on these challenges, and here I stand.
Well, I'll give you all a moment to compose yourselves because you're not going to like this, I assure you. So, I've read all 28 of the consent decrees that were done in the Obama administration, and this is nothing like any of them. I don't know what happened, but I could tell you this. The things that I'm hearing that are being presented as fact are simply not true. Right now, the department is at the highest head count it's been at in 10 years. That's a fact. And the rhetoric is not going to change the fact. Training. Officers get way more than 2 days of training. I can assure you of that because I increased it. So here's part of the issue. That consent decree has flaws, like Lori points out. It's heavy on documentation instead of supervision. Supervisors are going to be off the street instead of on the street supervising what's happening. I don't agree with this consent decree in its form. It needs to be changed.
I do believe that it's important to enforce the consent decree. I also believe that the key component of that, which I think lots of us can agree with here, is that our police force needs better training and resourcing. And I have a family member who's on the force, and these guys don't get the quality training that they need. When we ask a police officer to put on that uniform and go into some of the toughest neighborhoods, risking their lives for people that they have never even met, it is not okay that they don't have quality crisis intervention training, that many of them don't know how to tell the difference between a person who's struggling with mental health issues or a person who's just being confrontational with the police. This is a reality of what these officers walk into every day, and we can't expect that they'll miraculously know how to handle each and every situation. When an officer has to wait for a taser, we know what happens. That should never happen. But at the end of the day, all of the rules on the books are great, but if we're not making sure that those guidelines make it down to the rank and file every single day, then we're not doing our jobs. As mayor, I'll make sure that works differently.
Okay. So this next question is for candidate Vallis. To start, all of you get to answer. Over 80,000 Chicagoans experienced homelessness in 2017. Of these, over 11,000 were unaccompanied youths, 14 to 24-year-olds who were not living with parents or in DCFS care. Nationally, 40% of youth who experience homelessness identify as LGBT. What is your plan for eliminating homelessness among youth, especially LGBTQ youth in Chicago?
Keeping the microphone away from me. Well, thank you. Under my affordable housing plan, I talk about taking the homes that are currently not occupied, not only 10,000 that the city controls, but I think there's 30 or 40,000 that are in housing court and elsewhere, and bringing them in, turning them over to community-based organizations so that those houses can then be retrofitted and brought back into the community. Now, those houses can be used for a variety of. They can be used for senior housing. They can be used for veterans. They could be used for out-of-home use, homeless use. They can can be used as transition housing for individuals, for example, those who are the victims of domestic violence. But with close to 50,000 homes that are sitting there idle, rotting, like the schools that the mayor closed, which have never been turned over, very few have, there's no reason why we can't secure that housing and make that housing available. I also mentioned that the point about garden units. Garden units are all affordable. 150,000 garden units could be created if we just removed automatic privilege and we removed the obstacles to conversion of unapproved property. Thank you.
Thank you. I've called, this is a resource problem as well. People will tell you it's not, but I've never seen a problem in government where you don't need some money to address it. In order to build these units and incentivize developers to build them even further, we need to source some money. I've proposed a 1% tax on all million-dollar home sales. Some people don't like it, but the Chicago Coalition of Homeless said it was the right thing to do, and I support it. That should generate about $150 million new dollars a year. That'll give us the money we need to leverage private development so that we can actually get at this issue. But like we talked about earlier, it's not just a matter of four walls. We need services for our teens from the community. We can't just put them in a house and say, great, I hope you're okay. When you've been abused, when you've been thrown out of your home, when you've been victimized in some way, we need services. We need psychological resources that are there to help people as well. It's both things at once, not just one thing.
Homelessness in Chicago is just not an issue that can be resolved overnight. You know, we have 55,000 vacant homes and buildings here in the city of Chicago, and they can't be all rebuilt. But you could have joined us on some of the fights that we did for the veterans to make sure. But homelessness is also a mental health issue. It's a substance abuse issue, and we've got to deal with that problem. And until we realize it, we're not going to get anywhere. And you know what? We do have a lot of schools that haven't been opened yet or sold off. Maybe we got to look at boarding schools, getting the kids under the proper treatment and care and education so that they can succeed. That's the only way we're going to solve this problem. And we all have to unite together, all of us in this room, to make sure we solve the problem. Because I'm tired of going under viaducts and looking at everybody. That stretch from Roosevelt to Taylor Street along the Dan Ryan, hundreds of tents. Think about it, folks. Thank you.
So in Springfield, I sponsor legislation for a homeless Bill of Rights. It's so very important that this issue is taken seriously, because when you look at people, as Bob said, under Wacker and on the west side of Chicago, now it's not isolated to downtown under Wacker. Now it's on our front doors, in our neighborhoods. People are homeless, and we see them when we leave out of our houses. And so that's unfair. What I think we have to do, without a doubt, as it relates to eliminating homelessness, is to make sure that we eliminate the gentrification in our communities, because not only are youth being put out on the streets, but so are working families. It's so unaffordable to live in Chicago, and that must change. Also, it's important to make sure that our schools are teaching our kids so that they can have dignity and they're prepared to go to work so that they can afford to live in this city.
Homelessness should not be a thing in the year 2019. We have to provide more resources to our homeless residents so they are taken off of the streets. And there's many ideas up here to make that happen. But Gary raised an important question of services. And the question was about our youth too. We have to start investing in our youth so we don't have a generational poverty. And one of my specific ideas is called the Little Professionals League. And think about it, if you can have Little League Baseball or Little League Softball or Little League Soccer, we can have Little League doctors, Little League attorneys, or Little League carpenters, where we're preparing our students early on so that they don't have to grow up in a poor environment. We can invest in them not only educationally, but as in a career path. So before they get to college, they can have at least an idea of what they want to do in life. But if we continue to ignore our youth, we will end up with the same problems. And I think that specific idea will work well in moving forward.
The growing homeless population in our city is a sin. It is a sign of our neglect. It is an expression of our values, and it's devastating to our community. We can do this. Of course, it's a resource issue, and I proposed a graduated real estate transfer tax to generate tens of millions of dollars to help us address it. But we also have to look into the eyes of the people that are out on the street, and particularly the young people in the LGBTQ community, as I have. I've been to the night ministry, I've been to shelters on the north side, and these are kids who have been thrown out of their homes because they're choosing to live their authentic self. And go there, but for the grace of God, go I. So we have to embrace these children. We have to provide them resources, wraparound services, and we have to see them where they are and make sure that they've got the support that they need to be able to be part of a community and to thrive. We can do this, but it's a question of values first and foremost.
Well, Paul already gave you my plan for creating affordable housing, so I don't have to repeat that. And I have to agree with all the rest of the candidates here that this goes to social services, and that's really part of the outreach. When I was superintendent, we put together an initiative with Alderman Kappelman to work in his ward on individuals who are homeless in a task force type setting between social services and policing, and it worked extremely, extremely well. This goes to what I'm talking about for these help centers that need to exist in the community. And by the way, if people are afraid to go to the police, we now have a place, once we put these help centers out there, to facilitate individuals who might be afraid to come straight to the police, to go there and get the help that they need, working in conjunction with the police. So again, we have to fix the problems behind the homelessness if we're going to fix the homelessness, not just produce good housing for them.
Whoa, sorry. I gotta keep watching out for this guy. Jeez. Okay. So, I think again, in 2019, we can all agree that it's shameful that we would have any homeless youth sleeping under a bridge or living under a viaduct or having to find shelter riding the midnight train or the all-night train. This happens every day in Chicago. We also have to be honest and clear that when we talk about homeless youth, we're primarily talking about transgender and kids of color. This society has to do more than just worry about simply adding more housing units. It's really about calling out the systemic racism and the structures of racism that add to this level of inequity. As mayor, I'm going to be conscious of figuring out what we can do again to make what is true today in Boys Town that beacon and not have it only be a bubble. We have to make sure that we are intentionally reaching out and providing those wraparound services, providing the quality health care that these students, many of which are students or dropouts because of their homelessness, need to be able to get a chance at success. Sorry.
You know, we can't have a strong city without affordable housing in all our neighborhoods. And when I was alderman, as I said, we built 1,500 units of housing, most of it affordable rental housing. We have to have more affordable housing in all of our neighborhoods, and we have to invest more of city resources in that housing. Presently, what we're doing is using federal funds and other resources and not contributing our own corporate dollars to it. We need to do that. We need to look at the Affordable Requirements Ordinance, which is supposed to put money into affordable housing in our neighborhoods. And unfortunately, very little housing is being built with that resource. So one of the things we need to do is put a task force together to figure out how we're going to up the ante in terms of resources for affordable housing. And as for youth services, again, 30 to 40% of the homeless youth are members of the LGBT community. So we need to focus on resources and support services for the LGBT youth if we're going to address the homelessness crisis for young people. And finally, I think it's really important to understand that housing is a right like health care.
Time.
Thank you.
So Mike Ziri, you were on it tonight. So we're going to end the program with thanking Mike Ziri for taking him out of his mode of being one of the most friendliest people I know. I also want to take the opportunity to thank folks who were behind the scenes that pulled this off today. Today's house manager, Montez Dorsey, who's worked together with us to put this on. I want to thank my colleague, Brian Solom of the AIDS Foundation of Chicago, Ardina Hoffman of Equality, Illinois, who worked with the volunteers, Mr. Deontis Keys, who's streaming this on Facebook Live. Thank you so much for that. Miles Brady Davis of Equality, Illinois, the fabulous Miles Brady Davis, and of course, the Second Presbyterian Church, and all of you all, the candidates, all 11 of you all who showed up for us today in the snowy weather. And thank you, Kim, I think you should thank the audience.
And thank you all for coming out on a snowy winter day to be fully engaged in democracy. Thank you so much.
One more thing before the candidates. How about all of you all stand up and end it with this? In Illinois, I'm sorry, where is that question? So I think this is very important, so that's why we're gonna get to it, and it's a lightning round question. The municipal ID offers a third gender option. Simply, will you work with your administration to make sure that this absolutely happens in your administration? Yes. Can we say this in unison? Yeah. Can you say, well, no, we want to hear from you individually. We want to hold you to it. I'm sorry, Mr. Fioretti.
Oh, you got it.
Yes. Yes.
Of course.
Join us in the fellowship hall to meet the candidates. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. You got one hand.